All right, so let's move on to DePIN real quick. Decentralized physical infrastructure networks. For many of you guys watching or listening, this is one of those tools. If you think of it, I think a lot of people look at it and say, "Oh, this is like the Internet of Things." Yes, a little kind of, but what are you guys seeing right now in terms of the potential for DePIN?
I think DePIN has tremendous raw material. So when you break down the model, it is a coordination model, right? It's on the supply side, how can I incentivize and motivate many people around the world to help set up a system such that it can create a benefit or a product on the back end.
Right.
And tokens are a really good coordination mechanism because you're either a partial owner of that, public utility in the long term, or you can at least potentially benefit from governing it. And, we haven't tackled a ton on governance yet, but I think it's very early there. And we're going to see some really interesting examples when, the banks wake up and they say, wait, there's this borrow lend protocol called Aave out there. And everyone can use it. I need to own 5% of it. I know I can't own the whole thing, but I want 5% of it so I can govern it. So DePIN is really kind of early evidence that large groups can coordinate to deliver a new service and to sort of own that in a co-op model, which, I think is still a very good business model if the technology, can really self-perpetuate and help itself. So the pros of DePIN have been, wow, we can get millions of people to set up services that then create some network effect and actually work. The earliest example was Helium, where, everyone put routers in their homes. They benefited from the token incentives, and now they can offer, telecom services and mesh network services to the masses, and even, start to compete against some of the, cell operators and people who are plugged into the grid. The challenges with DePIN have been niche markets. So, even if I'm serving broadband to India, to many customers who don't have it, what's my kind of edge there? And once I penetrate that market, what do I do next? And, other services like positioning, how valuable is that? Or, other data services that are, being concocted. But when I step back, I think that DePIN is really the evolution of being able to do things together on the internet with both a quasi-corporate structure, i.e. the smart contracts and the governance, as well as capital. You can even take, my evolution of DePIN is, also includes things like Constitution DAO, where you have a group of people who wanted to get together to buy a physical item. And had they won that physical item and, were able to complete that, instead of getting outbid, then they'd have to do something with it. But what we need to see in DePIN, I think, is more evidence of the demand side. And, you look at some of the DePIN dashboards, and it's just a little bit discouraging that there's only trickles of revenue, $1 million for some of the largest projects. But I think we're also nearing an inflection point there, where someone like LivePeer, who started with video transcoding as a very basic, service to reduce the cost 90% of people delivering video across many different formats and devices, opened up a new market, which was community, owned platforms being able to serve video. It was too expensive for many to serve video unless, they had a huge cost reduction. So they opened up a new market through that cost reduction. And now they need to layer on a lot of different services. Like, what else can we be doing with video and transcoding now that we own these rails? But to date, we've seen a lot of tinkering. I sort of think about DeFi as like a dad's hobby. Or, I look forward to getting my new DePIN device in the mail, and, you have a weather station on your roof. You have a, mobile operator here, and so on and so forth.
I've built and put a bunch of these in, so I know exactly what you're talking about for sure. It's kind of crazy. the kind of growth we're seeing within it for sure.
And I think the physical hardware nature adds some complexity and some challenges. But at the end of the day, DePIN will probably evolve to be both software services. We're already seeing, for example, using people's IPs to capture, kind of data that's behind, firewalls or, is protected, and sort of amassing that as a community good. Which again then feeds into other use cases like AI and things. So I think it will be a mix of hardware and software, but we're sort of still looking for that. We're still looking for that category leader. I think in certain subsectors, we think about mature companies that we invest, Series A and Series B as requiring kind of a large market. And we've seen that in Web3 infrastructure with layer ones and other companies that have grown to become $5 to $10 billion outcomes. And we've seen that in DeFi and centralized, financial services, again, able to deliver large scale outcomes. In the emerging subsectors where we put DePIN, we just haven't seen that yet, but we still believe that market will exist. It's just a question of, sort of when and through who.
Well, the growth of Helium has been pretty significant. I was showing earlier, they've gone from really July of 23, which when they launched, and Helium Mobile.
Yep.
And where they are now, let me see if I can pull this up again. They're sitting at 150, it looks like 150,000 signups as of March of 25. So the growth is pretty significant. And now they have the free plan, which is, possibly going to be a very intriguing model for mobile, which, in essence is really not I wouldn't call it a true native, organic play of DePIN, because it's really just there's been some other companies that have done this in the past on piggyback. Who was it? Nintel did it up in the Northeast back in the, early 90s, where they were riding on some networks. They built a massive audience. AT&T ended up buying them. And I'm kind of curious as to whether or not T-Mobile's going to do that with Helium as they grow. But that's one that at least is showing some signs of life. So
it's definitely growing. I think when you look at that graph, the one thing we always talk about in the VC world is like at that exponential growth inflection point. Yep. And, while things are linear and interesting, I think people are hoping for some sort of exponential curve there. When you step back, unfortunately, 150,000 users and
nothing.
4 billion connected to the internet today.
Not much.
Like we have a long way to go there. But, certainly evidence, and that's exactly why we're excited about, the opportunity as an emerging category that it is delivering some value and people are finding it useful.
Yeah, for sure. Last question to you. Some of the more promising sectors, we've talked a lot here about, obviously, payments, AI, DePIN, kind of the future of stablecoins, et cetera. Once you move outside of those areas and you get into these more nuanced tech components, even if you look at, zero knowledge technology, which is going to really kind of change the game, I think, on a lot of dApps in the future. And now, really, for that matter, are you seeing any other real, positive trends that could be this Web 2 to Web 3 leap, or could launch a whole new view of how business is done, similar to kind of what Dakota seems to be doing in the banking sector? Any other areas?
Yeah, I think there's a number of deep tech, innovations that could be productized and commercialized as we look forward. You noted ZK, which, as helpful as it is for blockchain scalability, is also tremendously helpful for protected communications. Yep. So, we have one portfolio company, Sindri, who's already exploring and serving satellite to satellite communications.
Interesting.
When you want to say, look, I'm going left 50 degrees, but you don't want to give your, flight path for the next year of information, it can be done with things like, zero knowledge proofs, where you trust the math versus having to, trust the data or have to share all your data. When you move a bit forward, you have things like homomorphic encryption and FHE, which people are, starting to internalize, understand. It's just massively inefficient. It's just way too expensive. And so the software version might be too expensive. Maybe there becomes a hardware and a chip play there that helps deliver, privacy and security to large scale data lakes and enterprise solutions. So I think some of the deep tech, components and, technologies that are, sort of inklings and interesting ideas right now and a long way from commercialization could develop here over time and get really, really interesting. In scalability and interoperability, we still have a ways to go. We've proven that blockchains can scale, which is a tremendous leap from where we were 5 years ago. Right. But we're still kind of sorting out this interoperability challenge with, how to use both Ethereum and Solana and all the layer twos that are going to exist with specialized use cases that look more like app chains or specialized scalability layers. And, interoperability must be preserved to sort of keep the benefit of standardization of rails and transactions and wallets, and, ultimately both application developer and customer benefits. And I think it's still early there, but there's some great companies, folks like Hyperlane, that are working on permissionless ways that you can, create middleware to sort of sit on top of all the blockchains and make sure that both the data and the assets can be composable.
Well, and you hit on it right there. I think the key here is very early stage across a lot of these categories. So obviously CoinFund is in the right place at the right time. And your line list of people, I'm gonna dive into a lot of your portfolio projects. We've got to probably get some of these founders on our shows.
Yeah, that'd be great
to talk about this for sure. So I saw that you guys were in with Lightpeer. We talked with them a little bit around kind of the idea of where video is going. And so I definitely agree with that. Another one that I was interested in that looks like it is, I wouldn't call it social, but it at least is trying to do something around networking, and that was Icebreaker. So this is kind of like a LinkedIn. Is that what that is?
That's correct. Okay. They started off as a decentralized LinkedIn, but really, still in the idea maze of trying to, what I say, focus on applied blockchain. So taking some of the benefits and features that we've created from blockchains and applying them to real world use cases. So, one of those is, CoinFund is constantly spoofed on LinkedIn. I mean, there are so many employees that say they work at CoinFund that do not work at CoinFund. So even some of the most scaled, social networks and things that people leverage and work off as a trust graph, like don't work. And so Icebreaker's attempt to do a couple things, and right now they're really focused on helping kind of discover, high value, potential hires through a trusted network. So if I trust this person and they're recommending I speak with this person, that's a much more beneficial lead than cold inbound. And so trying to sort the world based on trust, they've done a really cool thing, which is, I have my Icebreaker, which is kind of like a link tree, where I can connect with Paul on Telegram, or I can connect with you on email, or I can connect with you on, Twitter. I can follow you. So they've sort of eased the onboarding from hey, how do I get on here and how do I connect with people? But then you can create subsets of information. You can say, I went to a conference and I've almost never met this person. I'm just giving them, my email. Another business card might give them your phone number. Another business card might give them your home address, as well as, a bunch of other information about yourself because you trust that person. That's
pretty cool. I like that.
And so that's kind of this whole trust graph of like, what do I want to share and with whom?
Yeah.
And Icebreaker's on the tip of that spear.
Very cool. Well, listen, it's been great chatting with you. I think what we're seeing in terms of new trends, Alex, is good to have companies like CoinFund out there kind of discovering this and investing in our future around Web3. So thanks for everything you're doing, and I appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paul. Really great conversation today, and I look forward to staying in touch. And you're doing great work out there to really help educate the masses around some of these new opportunities, which is very exciting. So we appreciate it.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun time for sure. Listen, if you guys are not subscribed to the channel, make sure and do that. You catch this on one of our secondary channels where we do our more lengthy and more in-depth podcast. This also goes out, of course, over on our audio version. So check it all out. Give us some likes and, of course, subscribe. And let us know in the comments what you guys think about where Web3 is heading. And we'll catch you next time right here on The PB Show.